Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching us from. My name is Dominic Waughray. I'm a Managing Director, member of the Managing Board here at the World Economic Forum in Geneva. And it's my absolute delight to be with you here with Sumant Sinha, who's Chairman and Managing Director of Renew Power in India. Now, we're going to hear a little bit more about Renew Power, but I'm delighted to say that Renew Power has recently been named part of the World Economic Forum's global Lighthouse network of companies. In fact, the first clean energy company anywhere in the world to be recognized as a lighthouse by the World Economic Forum. So Matt, we're delighted with this outcome. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your company and about what it means to be linked to the World Economic Forum in this way as a lighthouse company.
Yeah, sure, Dominic. Thank you so much for first of all for having me on this discussion. Great to talk to everybody who's watching in right now. So obviously we are very sort of privileged and honored with our relationship with the World Economic Forum. And what delighted us, of course, especially is to be recognized by the WEF as one of the lighthouse companies globally, of which there were only really 15 chosen this year. And to be one of only 2 companies in India was, in fact, in our view, a tremendous honor for us. Why this is actually important is because, we have a ton of assets that we operate, and all of those assets give us a huge amount of information and data, and analyzing that data and really being able to use that data to generate higher levels of performance from our assets, in our case, at least by 3 or 4 percentage points, is actually a great sort of value addition for us. And we put in a lot of effort over the last year and a half to actually put in place our own digital lab, hire various data scientists and engineers, and really put in place this program to gather the data, analyze it, and really use a lot of AI metrics and tools to increase the performance of our assets. And I think that is something that all companies, all renewable energy companies in the world must do. Because if you can actually, for the same capital cost, generate 3 or 4% extra generation, then that obviously goes straight to the bottom line, and is actually also very good because obviously we get more clean energy in the process. So I think getting that recognition hopefully allows more renewable energy companies now to go down that path, and I'm glad that WEF has chosen to give us that honor.
So thank you so much. It's so fascinating to hear because there's that confluence, if you like, of the new digital economy, the clean energy economy, and this race to zero that people are calling, getting to net zero by 2050 or sooner to tackle climate change is at the heart of what we've called the 4th industrial revolution here at the World Economic Forum, and the advanced manufacturing platform of which you are not only a part of, but a leader through your Lighthouse company, is bringing together kind of initiatives and activities in this space. I understand even you've gone even further than that. You've even written a book about how you see personally, and perhaps drawing on your experience of your company, how these things can play out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that sounds a pretty interesting read. And for those who want to get it, how can they find it?
Yeah, sure, Dominic. Look, the book is called Fossil Free, Reimagining Clean Energy in a Carbon-Constrained World. Obviously, you can order it on Amazon or one of these kinds of services. But the real reason that I wrote this book was because we're in the midst of an energy transition of the kind that we've seen perhaps twice in our entire history. We first, of course, saw the transition to coal, and then eventually in the mid-19th century and early 20th century into oil and gas. And now we are seeing this incredible transformation happening towards cleaner sources of energy. And I think that is something that people don't yet fully recognize and realize. With the cost of clean energy having come down to the extent that they have, eventually clean energy is going to be replacing all the existing installed capacities of the conventional power sector, thermal, etc. And over time, as demand growth continues to happen in the power sector, it is going to be replacing or actually meeting a lot of the incremental demand growth that happens. And eventually things like hydrogen and other hard to abate areas will also sort of come to the party. And that's again going to offer opportunities for clean energy to grow. And my feeling really was that this is something that is not really well recognized, that we're in the midst of a once in a lifetime kind of an energy transition. And really the purpose of the book was to talk about it, talk about how clean energy might contribute to creating a carbon-free world eventually, and why, in fact, creating a carbon-free world is absolutely urgent and imperative for us. So really offering pathways to show how we could get there. So that was really the purpose behind writing the book. It actually took a lot more effort than I thought it would take at the time I started writing, but I think it was well worth the effort in the end.
Well, fantastic, and many congratulations. Fossil free. Go look for it. Now, I must ask, how have your industry peers and other CEOs reacted to this? Because I guess there must be many in the energy community that you interact with and work with who say, yeah, this is all fringe, this renewable, this clean stuff, this is not going to happen for 20 years. Is that still the same feeling, or can you sense that things are changing?
No, I think, Dominic, we've now crossed the tipping point. I think it's quite clear to me now. I think 2 years ago, if you'd asked me the question, I would have said that a lot of people were not aware of the centrality and the mainstreaming of renewable energy and clean energy in general. But I think now people have cottoned on to the fact that this is the way of the future. And that's why you see now more and more capital coming into the space. Globally, if you see the amount of capital now going into ESG funds, which are environmental, social, and governance, but really oriented more towards the clean energy side or the climate change mitigation side, those funds have increased tremendously. So global institutional investors are investing more and more of their money in this area. Banks have chosen to set very high targets of lending and channeling capital into this area. And I think global oil and gas companies as well are now focusing more and more into this area, because I think everybody now has begun to realize that clean energy is going to grow rapidly. And I'll just give you a couple of very simple data points. Today we have globally 6,000 gigawatts of power capacity installed. The expectation is that over the next 20 to 30 years, just in renewable energy, we'll need at least 15 to 20,000 gigawatts, which is almost 2 to 3 times the existing power sector installed capacity will just have to be added in renewable energy over the next maybe 20 years, which is recreating the entire installed power sector capacity in the world right now over the next 20 years only in renewables. And that same thing, narrative is playing out in every single country. India has to install, has a target to install almost 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, up from the existing 90 gigawatts. And so that's like a 5-time growth in the next 10 years. And that's on the back of power demand growth. And another very quick data point for you, a country like India is already a large market, growing fairly rapidly. Over the next 15 years, we'll add a power market, the existing size of the Japanese power market. So that's how rapidly we're going to grow. And over the next 25 years, we'll add a power market the size of the European Union to India. And so, the opportunities in our space abound, and companies that have got in or that will get in now will find tremendous opportunities to grow. And I think that's a realization that is now really setting in amongst CEOs that you talked about or asked about. And so therefore, you're really seeing a concerted move happening globally into this space. And this is going to be a sector that is eventually going to become much bigger than the current oil and gas industry size is at this point in time.
That's so fascinating. They're incredible statistics, but as you said, illustrates the opportunity space for growth. I guess what we're hearing a little bit, and I'd be fascinated to know from your perspective if it sounds the same, is the conversation has also shifted from just sort of renewable energy for electrification for households and smaller businesses and such, also into looking at the clean energy for industry. I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but green hydrogen and things like this. Do you see those aspects also taking off in the Indian context, more interest in the clean energy for steel and cement and the other backbones of the industry economy, shall we say?
No, absolutely, Dominic. And in fact, it's absolutely essential as well, because within, energy accounts for 3/4 of the world's carbon emissions. And within that, electricity or power accounts for only 1/4. So 2/3 of total energy consumption comes from mobility, it comes from the industrial sector, it comes from heating, it comes from all of these non-electricity oriented sectors. So it's absolutely critical for us to not just green the electricity side, but we also need to deepen electrification in general. And that is something that is eminently now going to begin to happen, especially now with things like green hydrogen and so on coming up, mobility moving towards electric vehicles. So all of those are actually very positive. And those are all going to actually eventually end up leading to this race towards net zero, which is so incredibly important now. And you know, all of that is going to essentially ensure that carbon emissions come down faster, but also again provide more legs to grow the entire clean energy side of the business as well. But some of those technologies still have not yet got to the point where they are cost effective. So green hydrogen, you know, for example, will take another few years. Storage technologies also need to evolve, may take another couple of years to really get cheaper. But there is so much research and investment and capital pouring into these areas now that it's inevitable that that is going to happen. And as that happens, it's going to provide enormous sort of changes in the whole energy consumption paradigm as we know it at this point in time.
Very, very interesting indeed. It's such a heavy innovation and R&D agenda, as well as the deployment of already existing and cheaper technologies. It begs the question, and I suppose you're very close to these things, not only in the corporate community, but perhaps also interacting with the governmental community at state or national level. What's your sense of India's trajectory, shall we say, in this net zero revolution? Do you feel that the country is on course for a clean economy future? How quickly will that take? Some of the roadblocks and obstacles to overcome, because we have this big climate COP meeting, UN Climate Summit, which the UK hosts at the end of the year. And many eyes, as you well know, are on India, both for its innovation, R&D, science agenda, its industrialists like yourself, but also that interaction with government and policy. What's your feel of India's trajectory in the clean energy revolution?
Yeah, look, those are incredibly important questions, and you've posed a number of them within that question. So let me try to just address them to the extent I can. So look, you know, it is one thing to set a net zero target out to 2050, or in the case of China to 2060. But I think what is more important than the target itself is the plan of how to get there. You know, you can get there like this, or you can get there like this. And the total carbon emissions into the atmosphere will be totally different in either of those two scenarios. And so therefore, it's not just important to eventually have a net zero achievement at the end of, you know, 20, 30, 40 years from now. It's also very important as to how we're going to get there. And that we all as countries take credible near-term steps to embark on that journey. And I think what India is focusing on really is saying, look, let's not look out that far. Let's look at in the near term, in the here and now, what can be done. And it is in that context that India has set this target of 450 gigawatts of clean energy to be done by 2030, which is by no means an easy target. Let me hasten to add, it requires a lot of reforms in the power sector, a lot of capital, almost $500 billion of capital will have to come in, requires enormous amounts of execution on the ground, grid management issues. So a whole host of things have to be addressed, even just to meet that target. So I think right now, India is focused on just trying to make sure that we are able to use the next 10 years in the most efficient manner to at least get to stage one of this journey towards net zero. I think at some point along that journey, as we get better visibility about our ability to achieve these numbers in a way that does not hurt the economy, does not hurt economic growth, because keep in mind that justice issues and equality issues are very critical and uppermost in Indian policymakers' minds, and for correct reasons as well. I think then they'll start looking at maybe setting a peak emissions year, and then perhaps as the next step, looking at a net zero type of a commitment. So I think what India is doing is very credible, very sensible. And I think it's hewing to both looking at justice issues, as well as trying to use clean energy and all of these developments as an opportunity for potentially driving faster economic growth as well, because these are new sectors that are developing in the world. And it's a great opportunity for a country like India to take the lead in some of these areas. And so that's, I think, the kind of agenda that the Indian government is trying to pursue right now on this quest of reducing carbon emissions, fostering rapid economic growth, and yet ensuring that we get our fair space in the carbon budget, in the atmosphere.
No, that's really, really illuminating, because many people forget just the degree of which there's many without electrification in India. You know, it's an emerging economy and has just such extreme opportunity in R&D and science and cutting edge technology, as well as a large population still requiring some of the basics. I have to ask, because it's something that's always on the politicians' minds, could you see a coal-free India?
I think eventually, yes. I don't think there's a choice. I think all countries have to move towards becoming coal-free. It's going to take time in the Indian context, but I am pretty convinced that certainly from a technology standpoint, that solutions will be available. Give us 10 years in the industry, we will be able to give you baseload power or power that meets whatever demand curves or demand load curves that exist entirely through clean energy and storage-based solutions. That will be possible. After that, it will become a political question of at what point you want to phase out the coal industry, the jobs associated with that, the parts of the country where development happens and survival happens on account of these issues. But from a technology standpoint, those solutions will absolutely be available, literally within at a max 10 years.
Wonderful. Listen, Sumant Sinha, Chairman and Managing Director of Renew Power, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend a few minutes with you on this. And remind us again of the title of your book.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for that. The book is called Fossil Free, Reimagining Clean Energy in a Carbon-Constrained World. And
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Not at all. If you were intrigued and excited by some of the thoughts that you heard there, go and read the book. It is terrific. Thank you, sir, for finding some time.